Hey you guys, welcome. This video is going to be a demonstration of how to use the quick mask to paint in selections. Now, I have a selection already in place here, and the reason for this is to understand what a selection actually is once you save it. So, saving a selection is very simple. You just go up to the select menu, and this is after a selection is in place. You go up to the select menu, and down at the bottom here, you have an option called Save Selection. Once you choose this, the selection is then saved as an alpha channel in the channels panel. So taking a look here at alpha 1, I didn't give it a name, I just generically left it called alpha 1. Alpha 1 displays the selected area as well as the selection itself, the marching ants. What I want you guys to all be aware of is that the selected area is depicted by the white area. So anything that is white in a channel is a selected area. Anything that is black is what's referred to as a masked area. Okay, so this is going to be really important when it comes to the quick mask, simply because the first thing we're going to do before we get started with it, I want to point out that here's the button for it right down here, the shortcut for it. You can also use the shortcut of the letter Q, you see from the pop-up there. Uh, the Q is the keyboard shortcut to access Quick Mask. Once you click on this, you are now in Quick Mask mode. All right, so now you can start painting to create a selection. We'll get to that in a moment. What I want to point out here are the options for this. To access the options, simply double click on the icon here. So when you double click, it opens up the Quick Mask Options dialog box. So what we have here are two options. The default is color indicates masked areas. What that means is that when you paint to create a selection, what you're actually painting is the protected area or the black area. You may want to work the opposite way and choose to paint the selected areas and paint in the actual selection itself. Honestly, it really doesn't make a difference which one you choose, because if you think about it, if you paint the masked areas instead of the area you want selected, you can always invert the selection later using the select inverse option. So it really doesn't make a difference, but sometimes, like personally, I prefer to paint in a selection versus a mask, but then there's times when I prefer to paint in a mask. But again, it's still the same. You could change that however you want. Now the other option here is the default red color. So the red is used every time you paint a mask by default. The opacity is at 50%. Now the opacity of the mask is not the same as the opacity of a brush per se. So if you're painting with a brush and you have your opacity set to 100% for the brush, which is what I'm going to demonstrate today, you're still going to be able to see through at least 50%. It'll be 50% opaque. The mask is, that is. The idea behind that is so that you can see what's underneath and see what it is that you're painting. Of course, you can change this, and you can also change the color. Now, the reason that I chose this image in particular is because the garment that I would be painting the selection on is red, and so is the mask color. So it would be very difficult to paint a selection in on something that is red using the exact same color. So if you ever want to change the color of the quick mask, click on it, or click on the square here. It'll open up the color picker, and in the color picker, you just simply choose another hue. All right, something that's going to easily be seen here. All right, I'm just going to cancel out of this. I'm going to leave it at red for the demonstration. I'll paint in the outlying areas. Okay, so again, these are the options for the quick mask, and you access them by double clicking on the quick mask button. So I'll just go ahead and hit OK. When I did that, I exited out of quick mask mode. All right, so I'm going to go back into it simply once again by clicking on the button there. Once I do so, I'm now in quick mask mode. You can use any tools that allow you to paint. So I'm going to begin with regular selection tools. I'll start out with a rectangular selection and click and drag. If I want to fill this in as part of a selection, I can use our keyboard shortcuts that we've learned in class. Option delete fills with the foreground color. Command delete fills with the background color. On the PCs, that would be the equivalent of the Alt backspace and the Control backspace. So the other thing we need to understand about quick masks is that quick masks work with your foreground and background colors, because we're talking about painting now. When you paint, if you're painting with a brush, for example, you paint with the foreground color. Currently, my foreground color is black. So I'm going to fill this rectangle in with my foreground color of black using the shortcut of Option Delete. What you will see is that it actually fills in with red, not black. Okay, so whenever you paint in Quick Mask mode, you're actually painting in the red color that we saw in the options. So again, this is just a demonstration. This is just one way of filling an area in. If you take a look at the channels panel here, you'll see that, again, what I'm painting in are the masked areas. Remember, the black area is the masked area, the white area is the selection. Even though I have marching ants around this rectangle, I'm actually painting in the mask. And if you recall from the options, the default is color indicates masked areas. Okay, so again, you can always invert it. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to switch over to another tool. This time I'm going to use the paintbrush. This is the more common tool, but you can use any tool that will allow you to paint. Paint bucket, you can use the eraser, you can use a gradient tool. Again, anything that will allow paint. So for this example, I have a paintbrush. If I want to paint using the paintbrush, let me check my settings. I'll take the hardness somewhere in the middle. I have it at 55%. Again, when I'm painting with my foreground color, instead of painting with black, I'm painting in red. And once again, what I'm painting in is a masked area. The selection will be on the outside. Okay, notice that it has soft edges because of the 55 setting that I'm using for the hardness. Now here's the nicest thing about working with Quick Mask. If you make a mistake, you can always correct the mistake and you don't have to hit Edit Undo. It's the same as using a selection tool where if you want to add to an existing selection, you can choose the Add To option and make the selection larger. Or in this instance, if you need to subtract from a selection. When working in Quick Mask, to subtract from a selection, you paint with the opposite color. So I paint with black to create the mask. If I click on the arrow here or hit X on the keyboard, it's going to switch the foreground and background colors and now allow me to paint with white. When I paint with white, I'm essentially erasing the mask. Okay, so I can fine tune this mask however I want. Okay, if I've gone too far, if I erase too much, once again, switch the colors, tap X on the keyboard, and paint with the opposite color. All right, to bring it back in. It's very simple to work with. Now, once your selection is in place and you feel that you have the selection that you want, all you have to do is, once again, click on the Quick Mask button here, Edit in Standard Mode is the option it'll switch to, or hit the letter Q on your keyboard. And what that's going to do is it's going to produce marching ants. The marching ants are around the outside of the image because, once again, I was painting in the masked areas due to the default option in the Quick Mask options. Okay, so if I want that to be the selected area, all I have to do is go up to Select and choose Inverse. And now the selection is this area here. So again, that goes back to the options and what I was pointing out, that it really doesn't matter which one you choose. It's just a matter of preference, how you prefer to work, but you can still turn your selections around at any time. Okay, now the other thing that we can do with Quick Mask is we can add to it. So let's say, for example, that I want to select this area up here. So I'm going to begin with the lasso tool. I'm not going to make a perfect selection here. I'm just going to get a very large area. So I start with the selection tool here, or the lasso selection tool, and I'm going to fill that in by going to Quick Mask mode. Now watch what happens. When I choose that, it actually fills the outlying area in with red because this is the selected area. All I have to do here is invert this by hitting Image, Adjustments, Invert. The shortcut that I used was Command I. Okay, Command I turns this around, so you can do it even while you're in the mask. Once again, Command I, Command I, Control I on the Mac, or on the PC, excuse me, or go up to Image, Adjustments, invert. Okay, Command I. It's not the same as select inverse because currently we do not have a selection. We do not have marching ants at this point. So this is now my starting point. I can now take a paintbrush, and the way that it's going to be a lot easier for you guys to work with is if you take a brush and determine what your edge hardness is going to be. I sample this a little bit. I play around with it so I can take these numbers up, paint a little bit, and compare the edges. That's a little too soft. Edit undo, Command Z. Take the edge up a little bit harder. Try it again. Okay, so that's going to work pretty well right here. Now, the other thing I didn't point out to you is that when painting, you want to set your opacity to 100% on your brush, at least for starters. By painting with 100%, you're painting a complete white area, meaning that if this is going to be a selection, it's going to be completely selected. All right, if I lower my opacity, if I paint with, say, 50% opacity, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a 50% opaque selection. That means it's going to be semi-transparent if I were to knock an area out. Okay, so painting at 100% until you understand this a little bit better, understanding the opacity better and the brushes better, will get you guys started and moving in the right direction easily and quickly. When working with depth of field or edges that are softer, they start to become softer, you can then switch the hardness of your brush. So this is one of the nicest features about this, even though this is not a harder edge here, but I can vary the edge of my selection. I have a harder edge up here and a softer edge here. I've taken it down to 49%. If I need it to be even softer, I can take that hardness down even further. And you can see how it's even softer now along the edge, how there's more spread as far as the selection goes. A harder edge up here, about halfway, 49%, and then it's at 0, nice and soft. Okay, so you can vary the edges of the selection. If I exit Quick Mask mode, I have my selection in place. I'll zoom back out. The selection is on the outlying area once again. Select inverse to turn it around, and then select save selection to save this as an alpha channel for future use. So I'll just call this left body. Hit OK. That now becomes a channel. Taking a look at the channel, let's get a closer look here so you can see exactly what it looks like as far as the edges go. You can see how the edges went from a little bit harder, softer, and then even softer. Another thing I want to point out is notice how my brush strokes are not very detailed. They're kind of jumpy. They bounce around a little bit. A brush is probably not the best option for painting selections on bodies and garments. At some point, you'll learn how to use other tools that will help you to define those edges better. But for right now, that's the option that you would that we're going to get started with, the paintbrush that is. Okay, so again, I was using this photo as an example because of the red. I wouldn't necessarily use a quick select around to select the garment here. There's other tools for it. So just keep in mind that there's going to be images that you will, or the tools are going to fit the image. So this is just a demonstration of how to work with the quick mask. Hopes it helps, or I hope that it helps. Best of luck, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.